Justice Minister Ronald Lamola says they were, as I said earlier, shocked to learn that the Gupta extradition request was rejected in February already, and no one seemed to know about it here in South Africa. It's understood that this court in the UAE turned down South Africa's request and recorded the Guptas as citizens of Vanuatu. Now, to discuss exactly how international law works in a case like this, I'm joined by Professor André Thomas-hausen, who's joining me this afternoon. Prof, good afternoon to you. Thanks for your time. Can we just first of all start, why would South Africa not be aware of an extradition request like this or any changes regarding an extradition?
Well, in a slightly flippant way, I would say you are shocked when you fall asleep at the wheel and the car crashes. So somebody was asleep. We have a full embassy in Abu Dhabi in the Emirates, and it is indeed very disappointing that this matter comes as a surprise. It's also a sad day. It's a sad news for South Africa. In 2018, we all hoped that massive systemic corruption would end, and that the investigations, the Zondo Commission, would at least have some consequences. With enormous delay, then finally, two Gupta brothers were charged with alleged abuses in the cash that flowed with the dairy farm project in the Free State, the Estina farm matter. But that involves under $2 million, when Minister Pravin Gordhan in 2019 said the total damage of the Gupta-caused state capture was about 500 billion rand. So not even an attempt was made to recover those 500 billion. And now we sit with a shambles. The extradition request has been turned down by the court in UAE. It's not just some bureaucrat that took a decision, and it's a full court. And yes, they may appeal, but actually the extradition treaty between South Africa and the Emirates states very clearly that if an offense can be prosecuted in the UAE because it was committed totally or in part in the UAE, then the UAE is free to refuse extradition. And this is exactly what they did.
Is this the end of the road? Is there another avenue to explore? I know, Prof, you said you can, of course, appeal this, but the UAE is a sovereign territory with their own court system. Is this the end of the road, or is there something else that can be explored?
It is probably the end of the road, because on an extradition request, you cannot just remedy the request by suddenly supplying different charges and further evidence. On what was supplied, it wasn't enough. And actually, the Mail and Guardian in November last year had a full-page article outlining why the extradition request wasn't moving ahead, why it was deficient. And I'm also cited in the South African media as having criticized that the request in part relied on an apartheid-era legal doctrine of common purpose, that just by association, you may be deemed to have committed a crime, meaning by having associated with people that have committed a crime, in this case, money laundering. So this is not enough in a proper legal process. And Lamola's department has failed on extradition matters. The Chang matter is now in South Africa for more than 4 years. For more than 4 years, an extraditable person is in detention without ever having had a day in court. So this is the second failure. I think it reflects on the poor judgment that we've also seen by the minister in his ill-fated attempt to become deputy president of the ANC, which was very destructive and negative. So South Africa is, of course, free to request an extradition on a new and better founded basis from another.
Prof, I just want to check if maybe your audio hasn't stopped. Professor, forgive me. I'm sorry, your audio dropped for a moment. I thought I lost you. Just continue your chain of thought. Forgive me for interrupting. You're talking about the Justice Minister.
Good.
His focus was on the deputy presidency. I can hear you. I can hear you. I can see you, Prof. I don't want to lose your chain of thought there. You were talking about the Justice Minister when he was pursuing the deputy presidency, distracting him. I lost you from there. So just pick up from that for me.
Okay. I was just making a passing remark that there was poor judgment in that decision, like there was poor judgment in many others. And the Department of Justice is not amongst the well-performing departments in the Ramaphosa administration. All legal practitioners know that and complain about it daily. It's not just me. The difficulty could be overcome if a fresh extradition request is made towards a new country where the Guptas might choose to live now. It's been reported that they've moved to Switzerland. So it is not difficult to very quickly ask for their arrest, their rearrest, and their extradition from such a new country. Probably has more chances than to pursue the lengthy appeal process in Abu Dhabi.
And you're quite right, Prof. So it does sound like, from not just you but other experts I've been hearing from, that the UAE angle of getting the Guptas back into this country, not going to happen. There's two countries. You've mentioned one, Prof. One is Switzerland. The other, as I mentioned in my introduction, is Vanuatu as well. So you're suggesting the way forward on this is to go for an extradition request from one of those two countries. May I ask, do we know what our extradition treaties and agreements are with Switzerland in this case, and Vanuatu? Well, what do we know about them?
Well, definitely with Switzerland, we have a fully functioning extradition arrangement, which has been in place for many, many years and has been used. With Vanuatu, I'm not so sure. They may be part of a convention that would allow for extradition, but you don't need a treaty to extradite. You actually do the normal thing is you issue a request to Interpol based on a warrant for arrest, and that becomes an international red notice. So wherever the Guptas cross a border, wherever they have to present an identity document, by law, they would have to be detained. And then after that detention, South Africa is free to file its extradition request and fundament the request, and maybe do it more meticulously and more carefully, and then maybe it will work. So it would be wrong now, as unfortunately I think the minister has done already, to scold the Emirates. The UAE has a meticulous track record on fighting corruption, money laundering, and extraditable offenses. Only last month in March, they extradited an Italian mafia boss, Raffaele Imperiali, I believe his name was, after only 7 months, because the whole process was well conducted and well prepared. They do extradite regularly, so it is not as if the UAE would be a country giving shelter to international criminals.
I'll ask you this, Prof, as a last question to you, and I appreciate your time. If the Justice Minister, as I'm hearing you say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth, I'm hearing if the Justice Minister, Ronald Lamola, had done a better job of this, if he was more prepared, if he was more involved, if he was more engaged, we would have had a different outcome. This sounds like this could be the Justice Minister's fault, that the Guptas aren't coming back to South Africa.
Well, the minister never has time to do this work himself. He, in this case, will have left it to the NPA, who will have put a team of people working on it. And I remember that it took an inordinate amount of time for them to understand that the request had to be translated with all its evidence and had to be submitted in Arabic. And it took a long time to achieve that. And then I think they had a difficulty in understanding that the translations had to be confirmed by a licensed and duly admitted translator in the Emirates. So there were a lot of small mishaps, I would say, due to a lack of experience and maybe an unwillingness of the department to just engage people with experience in these matters. The quality of a result that you get when you are the CEO, when you are the minister, depends on the quality of the people you employ to prepare that result. So it is, of course, not the minister personally, but in his department, there are, like in so many other departments, unfortunately, very severe shortcomings in performance and in skills.
Professor, I appreciate your time and thank you for making time on a public holiday as well. Always good to hear from Professor André Thomas-hausen, international law professor at UNISA as well. The buck has to stop with someone, and I suppose if it's the Minister of Justice in the end, regardless of who he surrounds himself with, it's going to come down to the Minister as to answer for this. But as he said earlier today, he was shocked to hear of the news of the failure of the extradition of the Guptas.